Hey, what's going on, guys? So, I promised you guys that I would start introducing whiskey content to the channel. So, here we are. And we're going to kick that off with the whiskey tour. I have a pretty extensive collection, so much like I did with my cigar collection in my Humidor Tour series. I'm going to split this into multiple parts. So part one today is going to be on Scotch and Irish. I feel like Irish in and of itself is a little too small of a collection to make its own video on. And it's probably just the right size to add to the Scotch collection. Also, small disclaimer, this isn't going to be all of my bottles, guys. I have quite a few bottles in storage, and to be honest, I'm not going to go to storage, grab all those bottles just to bring them here to do a collection tour. I have more than enough to suffice for a pretty good tour here. Plus, a lot of those bottles are backup bottles anyway, so it's really not necessary. And with that said, I'm also not going to be going through every single bottle of something. Depending on the particular whiskey itself, I may have 3, 4, 5 backups, right? So there's no reason to go through 5 bottles of the exact same thing. That said though, we're gonna go ahead and start. Before we get into it, I'm going to give you guys a little preface for how we even got here, right? How did I get started? How did I get to this point where I have this much whiskey, right? So for me, my whiskey journey actually starts about 10 years ago. I wasn't collecting at the time. I didn't actually start collecting until recently, much like my cigar collection. It was just something I dabbled in, something I explored. And 2015, senior year of college, I was 25 years old. Why I was 25 as a senior, long story, we're not going to get too far into it, but to make a long story short, after my freshman year, I left college, went to the Marine Corps for a while, came back, and then I also switched majors 3 years in. I started off as a biology pre-med major, ended up a psychology major, and then also after my third year, I decided to take a break because all of my friends had graduated. I needed a car. So I took some time off, worked, saved up, bought a car, came back, and then finished up my remaining year and a half of studies. Towards the end of my senior year, I actually bought a bottle of Hennessy XO. Now, Hennessy is not whiskey. Hennessy is a brandy. Brandy is not whiskey, although they are both brown liquors. But I was just curious, and I knew at the time that a lot of people drank for the sheer enjoyment of the whiskey or of the alcohol, not because they got drunk. Up to that point, my only experience in alcohol had been, as a college kid. So my favorite alcohol was actually vodka because it was tasteless. It had no learning curve. It was cheap, and so if I was either drinking vodka and cranberries or flavored vodkas like Cigar and Pinnacle, etc. The average college kid. So I wanted to try something different, and I bought a bottle of Hennessy XL. And I wasn't a drinker. Knob Creek 18, by the way. Wasn't a drinker, so it probably took me every bit of a year and a half to finish that bottle. It was bad. I remember at one point, it just randomly popped into my head, and I went and dug it out of a trunk full of random stuff. And then just to finish it, because it cost me, I think at that point in time, $189, which is insane. Most I ever spent on a bottle of whiskey at that point in time. So after I finished that bottle, I decided I wanted to kind of try and see what else was out there and figure out what worked for me, what I liked, what I didn't like, and figure out what my thing was. So after that, I bought a bottle of Maker's Mark, which I thought was good, but I didn't have a palate for whiskey, and to me, everything that had alcohol in it, at 40 ABV or more, drank hot. So while I did find that there were flavors in it that I liked, it was a little too rough and a little too hot for me, which now, base level 40% ABV whiskey tastes like water to me at this point. So, I just kept looking. I tried tequila next, Don Julio 1942, really good stuff. And next after that, I moved on to Scotch. Now, Scotch would eventually be the drink that would get me into whiskey truly, but it wasn't the Johnny Walker Blue. Okay, it was not the Johnny Walker Blue. In fact, nowadays I actually don't even like Johnny Walker Blue that much. If offered, I wouldn't say no, but I'd actually prefer Johnny Walker Black or Double Black over the blue. So not long after that, I had discovered Whiskey Tribe's channel on YouTube, and it kind of sent me really down the path that would eventually lead me to where I'm currently at. Monkey Shoulder was actually the first Scotch that I bought that I truly liked, fell in love with, kind of. Like, from that point on, I kind of always kept the bottle on hand for a good year, maybe two, honestly. And then I just started branching out into other Scotches, and eventually got into peated Scotch, and then eventually got into bourbon. And as you guys saw from the little snippet of a video that I gave you, as far as, like, you know, just a glimpse into my collection and what I have, you guys see that I have a shit ton of bourbon, a metric shit ton of bourbon. And that's mostly because I'm American. This is America, and bourbon is everywhere and it's plentiful. Still, Scotch is my home. Actually, in between, there was a stopgap in between Scotch and bourbon. There was actually Scotch, then Irish, then bourbon. And Irish whiskey, particularly Redbreast 12-year cask strength, is what showed me, one, how much I liked Irish whiskey, but two, how much I liked cask strength whiskeys. So that's enough of an introduction. That's enough talking. Let's go ahead and get into the actual collection itself, because we got a lot to go through. We'll start with the non-peated Scotches, and then we'll just go from there. So, non-peated Scotch number one, we have the Glenlivet 18-year. So I believe this is, 40% ABV, your basic 80 proof Scotch, although it has been aged for 18 years. This stuff is actually really good. I don't drink it much anymore. I believe this actual bottle is from like late 2023, mostly just because it doesn't really scratch that itch for me in terms of proof anymore. It's still a good whiskey, but at 80 proof, it also is lacking flavor and punch. Which, if you're drinking Scotch, you're not necessarily always looking for punch, but yeah. And then another unpeated Scotch here, which is going to give you a ton of punch, is Aberlour. So this is Aberlour Abuna. This particular one, I believe every release of the Abuna is proofed differently because it's cask strength. So that'd be my fiance in the background. But anyway, here we have a 61% ABV. And this is batch 76. I believe this bottle is also from late 23, possibly early 24. As you can see, I put a nice heavy little dent in it, but I want to say this is from 23 more than anything. So one of the things I actually look for nowadays in whiskey, which is another reason why I really don't touch that Glenlivet much anymore, is because, as you can see here, this is non-chill filtered. You're typically not going to get non-chill filtering in anything below 46% ABV. And even then, they still sometimes chill filter it. And this is also, I believe, no color added, but this was matured in Spanish Oloroso sherry butts. One benefit to me coming from Scotch and Irish and then getting into bourbon is that some bourbon purists don't like the idea of a finished whiskey or a finished bourbon. I personally don't have that issue, because when you're really into Scotch and exploring Scotch and everything Scotch has to offer, one of the main things that you're going to really get used to and even look for is the different types of finishing. So I guess I feel like I learned to appreciate finished whiskeys because I started off with Scotch and Irish before I got into bourbon. Another unpeated Scotch. This would be Bunnahabhain 12-year cask strength. This is the 2022 release, and this thing is a legitimate unicorn. So when you're talking about annually released stuff, batched release stuff, right? Unicorns aren't usually every single one, like every single release of that particular whiskey, right? Some years are better than others. This is arguably, to me, to this day, still one of the best batches of Bunnahabhain 12-year cask strength. Actually, still the best batch is, and I'll fight anybody over that. Seriously, it was highly, highly, highly regarded when it came out, but I still don't think to this day that they've actually matched it or exceeded it in any way, shape, form, or fashion. In fact, this might be my favorite non-peated Scotch of all time. I bought 3 bottles of this thing, and I don't know if you guys can tell here, but if you look, you'll see it says 70 centiliter, and that's because this is a European bottling. A lot of my Scotches, and you'll see Irish as well, as European bottlings, because especially a few years ago, it was just much easier and cheaper, honestly, to get my bottles overseas and then just have them imported. So one thing I mentioned with that Bunnahabhain 12 years that I bought 3 bottles. I killed the first bottle inside of a month when it first came. And then I've been nursing the second bottle for probably a little over a year now. And that third bottle, I don't know when I'm going to crack it, but I'm going to have it for a long time. I can tell you that much. Hopefully, there's still some bottles floating around out there. And if there are, I may just scoop some up. All right. That pretty much... Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up my non-peated Scotch collection. I did have a few others, but after sharing them with friends, giving some away, and then, you know, just kind of going where my tastes took me, I really don't have very much non-peated Scotch in a collection at this point. So moving on to peated Scotches. So I guess first off, we'll start with Springbank 10-year. This is 46 ABV, non-chill filtered, no color added. Springbank is actually rather unique in my collection and rather unique in general in that it's not an Islay Scotch. You'll notice that a lot of my peated Scotches are Islay Scotches, and that's mostly because most peated Scotch tends to come from Islay. You have some other islands in Scotland that are making peated Scotches, like Lechaig, and you got Springbank and Campbellton and stuff like that. But here you have 46 ABV, 10 years aged. So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit for you guys now so we can kind of get through this. Next up, we have the Balvenie. So anybody familiar with Balvenie knows that Balvenie typically doesn't make peated Scotches. I believe, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Balvenie in and of themselves are a Highland Scotch, but they do have a peated series. So this here you have the Week of Peat. This is the 17-year aged lightly peated Scotch. I mean, it even says in the bottle, this is the story of Ian Miller. Yep. Using smoke from Speyside peat for 1 week out of the year. Like I said, Balvenie, if you're familiar with Scotch, in general, I mean, does not make peated Scotches on a regular. It's just not their general profile. But I will say they make one hell of a peated Scotch. It's very light peat. It's not super campfirey like these other bottles we're going to get into, but you can tell it's there. Next up, we have Kilchoman. So Kilchoman is a relatively newer distillery. It's not a legacy distillery like all the rest of these bottles we're going to go through. This is the Loch Gorm, which is one of their signature annual releases. This is the 2023 Loch Gorm, I believe. You can see here non-chill filtered, no color added, 46% ABV, and then 18,000 bottles produced for this batch. Yeah, so this is the 2023, as you guys can see. And again, another European bottling, 700 milliliters, which you're seeing America now kind of gravitate towards a 700 mil bottling system more than just a 750, which I think sucks, but it is what it is. I'm actually going to have some of this Balvenie right now. It's been a while. Not a big glass, just a taste. Oh, I should also probably mention, I don't drink all that often. In fact, the drinks I've had today are probably the first drinks I've had in, I don't know, close to a month now. So I'm just not a huge heavy drinker. I will go through periods where I have maybe 3 or 4 drinks a week, and then I get to like try different things from my collection, and I might do that for a few months. But I'm kind of a health nut sometimes. And I'll go through periods where I'm really anal about it and periods where I'm not. And because of that, there'll be long periods where I'm just not drinking anything. So moving on, we have an Octomore. So Octomore is made by the distillery Bruichladdich out in Scotland. They're known for being super heavily peated. You could argue that past a certain point of ppm, i.e. parts per million, or some people refer to it peat parts per million. That's not it. It's just parts per million. You really can't tell the difference. And I honestly agree with that. But what I will say is that they do a lot of unique finishings on their scotches. So you know you're going to get something that's super heavily peated, and you're going to get something that is finished in something that's a bit more creative than your typical norm, right? So this is the 13.4. This was a limited edition release for 2022. And, there we go. This is Islay single malt. Finished in virgin oak. And you can tell the difference between this and the different scotch. It's a bit sweeter than your typical scotch, and it's also a bit punchier than your typical scotch, mostly because most scotch barrels don't see virgin oak. Most scotches in general are going to be aged in X bourbon barrels. So usually second, third fill, and all that really means when we get down to it is that this barrel's been used once or twice already before, which is why you typically when you get like hyper aged scotches, you start talking 15, 20, 25, 30 years. Unlike bourbons, which are very easy to over oak because you're using virgin oak, which has a lot more to give to the whiskey because it's brand new. With scotches, because you're using barrels that have previously been used, and most of their oils, tannins, barrel char, all that stuff has been used up. So it's imparting less and less onto the whiskey. So you can age it longer and longer and longer. And you kind of have to get more out of it. So here we have a backup bottle of the 13.4. I really liked it, obviously. And then this is one that I wish I had bought a second one of when I had the chance, but I just wasn't sure if I like it as much. This is the 10.2 Octomore, and this was finished in Sauterne casks. It's such a beautiful whiskey. So I know this particular bottle's in its sleeve, but trust me, it actually is open, and I cherish this bottle so much. When I first tried it, I went to town on it a little bit, and then gave out a few samples and whatnot. And there's still quite a bit left in here, but at the same time, because I know I can't get more, I generally just don't drink it that often. And it's kind of the same way I do it with my cigars, right? Nothing's sacred, but at the same time, if I really, really like something and I don't know, or, if I can get more, or I know I can't get more, then, you kind of got to pace yourself with it. All right, moving on. We have another bottle of Kilchoman. So this particular bottle was even more limited than the last, but it was a very specific edition. So the Loch Gorm was an annual edition, even though it's a small batch product. This is a small batch product, but it's also a limited edition. I believe this is only ever released like twice. So this is the Madeira cask matured, not finished, matured. So this scotch was heavily peated scotch because Kilchoman makes peated scotches, was matured in Madeira cask. So typically when scotches get creative, they're usually mature, spend most of their years in ex-bourbon filled barrels, and then they get finished in something exotic like PX sherry, Oloroso sherry, Madeira, etc. And just Sauterne, it just spans the gauntlet, right? But increasingly rare that somebody ages juice in something other than ex-bourbon barrels. So this was Madeira cask matured, not Madeira cask finished. Next up, we have the peated scotch that got me into peated scotches. This is Bruichladdich Port Charlotte 10-year, bottled at 50% ABV. And this was the scotch that got me into peated scotches. This was the first one I tried, and I fell in love with it. It actually contrasts the one I'm going to get into next pretty well, because this is more on the sweeter side of peated scotches. And then this next one, which is probably my favorite scotch of all time, favorite scotch of all time, favorite peated scotch of all time, you name it. This is the Ardbeg Uigeadail. So you pronounce that word there, Uigeadail. And that particular word is a reference to the river in which they get their water that they use for, you know, their fermenting and everything else at Ardbeg. And this is a more savory side of peat. They both are peated scotches, right? So Port Charlotte 10, Ardbeg Uigeadail, both peated scotches, but they're at opposite ends of the spectrum. So this is going to be more on the sweet side, like almost cloyingly sweet sometimes, and this is going to be on the savory side. This actually reminds me more of like barbecue and smoked wood. Speaking of Ardbeg, we have here Ardbeg Corryvreckan. And then we also have Ardbeg Bizarbecue. Now, Ardbeg Bizarbecue is one of their special edition releases. But again, those of you familiar with Scotch know that Ardbeg does a ton of special edition releases. In fact, it seems like that's all they do is special edition releases. And most of them are truly nothing special, but this is actually pretty good. And then moving on, we have Laphroaig Lore, which is an excellent, excellent peated Scotch. I don't drink a ton of Laphroaig, although I do have quite a bit of Laphroaig on hand. But the Lore is definitely one of my favorites. Although I consider anything under 100 proof lower proof. That's sitting at about 98 proof. My bad. That's sitting at about 96 proof. It's punchy enough to pack a good punch. Now, why I like higher proof whiskeys isn't because there's more alcohol. It's because there's less water. And since there's less water, the flavor is less diluted, and you're usually going to get a more flavorful product. Now, you can have lower proof whiskeys that have a very, very intense flavor profile. Case in point, I had somebody give me a sample of Pappy Van Winkle 12 year, and that did not drink like a 92 proof whiskey. It drank every bit of 100 proof or higher. So, moving on, we have Laphroaig Quarter Cask. And then we also have the Laphroaig 10 Sherry Oak Finish. I also have Laphroaig 10 Cask Strength and another Laphroaig, I think a Cargist that I can't remember, but those are in storage right now. So that does it, guys, for the Scotch portion of this video. At least for the things that I have on hand. And now we're going to move on to the Irish. So we're going to start with Redbreast, which is my favorite Irish brand of whiskey. And we're going to go in order of youngest in the collection to oldest in terms of years of age. So we're going to start off here with the Redbreast PX edition. So these are aged in PX sherry hogsheads. If you don't know what PX is, it stands for Pedro Jimenez. Okay, it's a very particular type of sherry. It's a very creamy type of sherry, a very sweet dessert-like type of sherry, and it's pretty awesome. It adds a lot of character to whiskey when whiskey is aged in PX casks. It's something that's very, very sought after, and usually when people go through the trouble of aging in PX sherry casks, it tends to do well. So moving on, we have here Redbreast 15. So you may be asking yourself, well, if you're going in order from youngest to oldest, and we just did a non-age stated Redbreast, why are you starting with 15 when there's a 12-year and 12-year cask strength? Well, that's because one, I no longer drink 12-year. I just don't think with the price hikes that it's worth it, and the actual flavor profile is just too muted for me. It's too low in proof. There's not enough flavor there for me to justify buying it or even really wanting to buy it. When I had it, it took me forever to get through it. When I first tried it, it was like a renaissance, right? Because I wasn't that familiar with Irish whiskey. But then as I got further into Irish whiskeys and got into cask strength whiskeys, it just didn't do it for me. But we have the 15-year here, which is a 92 proof, 15-year-old Redbreast whiskey. Okay, guys, next up we here have Redbreast 21 year, which much like the 15 is just Redbreast, but 21 years old. But here we have my pride and jewel, probably my favorite whiskey in my entire collection, regardless of genre, subgenre, whether we're talking Scotch, Irish, bourbon, and all the various stuff in between. We have a bottle of Redbreast 27 year. So this is literally 27-year-old Redbreast, and it is finished in ruby port casks. Ooh. So obviously, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and take this out of the box for you guys. So obviously, this is in the box, but it is opened. I don't regularly drink out of here, but I do have my occasional dram of Redbreast 27 year. As you guys can see, this is in fact open. I do drink it, but this is special. And I don't think it's special because it's 27 years old. I think it's special because it is without question one of the best whiskeys I've ever had in my life. So, yeah. The best way I can describe Redbreast 27 year, and I also love this bottle. It's in this red bottle that kind of pays homage to the ruby port that it's finished in. But it tastes like, on the initial taste on the front of the palate, it tastes a lot like, depending on where you went to school, right? I remember when I was a kid, they used to give us this fruit cocktail whenever they served breakfast. And this tastes a lot like that cold fruit cocktail syrup initially. And then as it evolves on the palate, it finishes as grapefruit. Like grapefruit, like you just had a piece of grapefruit or drank some grapefruit juice. It's that vivid and pretty awesome. All right, that sums it up for Redbreast. Now, we're going to get into the spots. So, I'm sure anybody here who drinks Irish whiskey has heard of the spot whiskeys. You have green spot, blue spot, yellow spot, gold spot, red spot. And we're going to start with the youngest age stated. Blue spot, 7 years. Now, you might think that because this is the youngest, that it's like the cheapest or the least sought after. No, this is actually one of the most expensive spot whiskeys, and it's one of the most sought after, mostly because it's cask strength. They don't make a ton of it, but also, again, non-chill filtered, no color added, aged 7 years, and this is phenomenal. Irish whiskey tends to have this shortbread note. Redbreast has it in spades, but that spot, that blue spot, definition of a shortbread cookie. Telling you. Next up, we have the original gold spot. So recently, Mitchell & Sons put out a 13-year gold spot, which is not bottled at cask strength or anything close to it. And mind you, while I'm not 100% sure if this is bottled specifically at cask strength, I can tell you that this is 51.4% alcohol. So at least it's over that 100 proof mark. Also very good. All right, so next up, we have green spot. So green spot is actually the cheapest spot, but it's also, coincidentally, one of the older spots. So this is 10 years old, even though it's non-age stated. It's kind of commonplace to know, like it's common knowledge now that we all know this is 10 years old. And it's actually the only spot that I know of that's bottled at 80 proof, at your standard bare minimum 40% ABV. After that, we have yellow spot 12 year. So for those of you who don't know, Mitchell & Sons also makes Redbreast. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But the 12 year spot, which by the way, it's not cheap. I can't remember what it was when I bought this. I think it was like 105, 110-ish. And now these are sitting at like 130 if you can even find them. It's kind of crazy to me. You have the 12-year age statement. This is a 3-cask maturation, actually. So not 3 casks like finished, but 3 casks matured. So over the course of its 12 years, it's aged in bourbon barrels, sherry barrels, and Malaga barrels. Non-chill filtered, no color added. So one of the things that I learned pretty quickly on when I got into Scotch in Irish whiskeys, which is another reason why I'm glad I got into those first before I got into bourbon. Is there are three basic things you look for as a whiskey enthusiast. The three basic things you look for is 46% ABV, non-chill filtered, and no color added. So typically you'll look for 46% ABV because one, that's just less water in your whiskey, but two, chill filtration. You won't ever see any whiskey under 46% that's non-chill filtered. And then chill filtration is something you don't want because it strips out oils in the whiskey, and in those oils are flavor. And lastly, no color added, because why would you want to add color to whiskey? Like, I get it as a seller because it makes the whiskey look more appealing, but as a consumer, why would I want to drink food coloring when I just want to drink whiskey? Anyway, also don't want to be lied to. That's just kind of, hand in hand. And then lastly, rounding off my whiskey collection, and mind you, all of these have backups, except the Gold Spot. I think the Gold Spot might be the only whiskey here that doesn't have a backup. I have backup yellow spots, blue spots. I don't have a backup green spot either, but I really don't like the green spot all that much. That's something I give to like guests who don't really know what they're drinking. I'll give them some green spot because it's not bad whiskey by any stretch of the imagination, but it doesn't scratch any itches for me personally. But here we have red spot, the oldest of the spots. Not quite sure if they put out anything with a higher age statement than this recently, because I haven't really been paying that much attention. But at the time I bought this, red spot was the oldest whiskey that was made under the Spot label. So this is 15-year-old whiskey, and it is also triple cask matured in bourbon, sherry, and marsala casks. This isn't as sweet as pretty much any of the other whiskeys that are on the table. This is definitely more on the savory side, but that's where it stands. So, guys, that wraps up part one. That is just part one of our tour